as we sit together, surrounded by the climate of silence and reflection, there are many things that crowd in upon us. The long shadows cast by the events of the last year, so recently past. The high resolves with which we began it, the stumbling, faltering ways by which we ended it, the narrow escapes from violence within and without, the high moments when it seemed as if for one swirling second all the goodness and beauty and completeness of life were contained. Those hours of sadness and tears when there was taken from our midst someone whose life was deeply entwined with ours, and since their journeying, the way has been hard, difficult, with no balm to heal the ruptured life, the broken heart. The long shadow of the events of the year that has passed so recently is upon us as we sit here. Our Father, we do not quite know altogether how to face the future. We do not know what there is in store for us tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. But as we share the meaning of this moment, our Father, gentle our spirits with thy great calm, that we shall not be afraid, that we may be sustained whatever may betide us. This is not our only option, our Father, but we turn to it with confidence and with hope. Leave us not in the despairing grasp of what may be our own futilities. Oh God, God of our spirits, Wherever there appears in human history a personality whose story is available and whose reach extends far in all directions, the question of his working paper is as crucial as is the significance of his life. We want to know what were the lines along which he decided to live his life. How did he relate himself to the central issues of his time? What were the questions which he had to answer? Was he under some necessity to give a universal character to his most private experience? Our attention is called to such a figure because of the impact which his life makes upon human history. For what is human history but man's working paper as he rides high to life, caught often in the swirling eddies of tremendous impersonal forces set in motion by vast impulses out of the womb of the eternal. When a solitary individual is able to mingle his strength with the forces of history and emerge with a name, a character, a personality, it is no ordinary achievement. It is more than the fact that there is a record of his life, as singular as that fact may be. It means that against the background of anonymity, he has emerged, articulate and particular, and this is an achievement. Such a figure was Jesus of Nazareth. To some, he is the grand prototype of all the distilled longing of mankind for fulfillment, for wholeness, for perfection. To some, he is the eternal presence, hovering over all the myriad needs of humanity, yielding healing for the sick of body and soul, giving a lift to those whom weariness has overtaken in the long march, and calling out hidden purposes of destiny which are the common heritage. To some, he is more than a presence. He is the God fact, the divine moment in human sin and human misery. To still others, he is a man who found the answer to life's riddle, and out of a profound gratitude, he becomes the man most worthy of honor and praise. For such, his answer becomes humanity's answer, and his life the common claim. In him, the miracle of the working paper is writ large, for what he did, all men may do. Thus interpreted, he belongs to no age and no race and no creed. When men look into his face, they see etched the glory of their own possibilities, and their hearts whisper, "Thank you," and "Thank God." 10 years ago, and I should say parenthetically, this is not a plug, but 10 years ago, I sat down in written form an answer to a problem with which I'd been wrestling all my life, as touching the impact and the significance of Jesus of Nazareth. It is my purpose during the next few weeks to take another long, hard look at this. For much has transpired since that time. And you will pardon me as we work along together if here and there some of the things that I have to say may seem to you so intimately private that I may seem to be living my private life in public. I began then with the first moment when I had to deal with the impact of the gospel of Jesus Christ on the life of people devoted to him as Savior, and the effect that impact, with all of its integrity of meaning and purpose, the effect that it had on me as a little boy. It was the first time that I had ever seen a man die. It was my father. I was a boy, 7 years old, and he was a man 55 years old. My mother and I stood beside his bed, I on one side and she on the other, as his giant frame, for he was a big man, wrestled in the last agonizing stages of the fight for air, when the body is a victim of double pneumonia. That could be heard all through the rooms which we occupied as our home. That sound which, once it is heard, can never be forgotten. The sound which in our community was called the death rattle. The fight of the lungs for air. My mother was very devout. And as she watched my father die, she said, calling him by name, Saul, for his name was Saul Solomon Thurman. Saul, can you hear me? And between these gasps, he said yes. Shook his head. Are you ready to die? She said. And then, with all of the effort available to him, possible to him, with punctuated gasps, he said, Alice, calling my mother by name, all my life I've been a man. I can face death. I'm not afraid of it. And with that, his huge body was lifted, as it were, out of the bed, and my mother and I held him down by sheer force, and then there was that great spasm, and he died. The minister of our little church, because my father died out of Christ, felt that in all honesty, and here I do not speak with vindictiveness and judgment now, he felt with all honesty that he could not have my father buried from the little church, nor could he take the service himself. Now, this posed a crucial problem, for it meant that our only other option was to have the funeral in one of the two rooms that we occupied. This was not possible. We could not have it at the undertaking parlor downtown because the undertaker would not even embalm us there. If we were embalmed, we had to be embalmed at the place where we died, and therefore we could not even be buried from such a place. So my grandmother went to talk with the minister, and she said, to talk with the deacons of the church, I'm sorry. She said, the minister has said that Saul cannot be buried from the church. Now, ministers come and go, but deacons are here with us. So, what are you going to do about it? And the deacon said, of course he can be buried from the church. But who would take the service? And then a traveling evangelist appeared. And he offered his services to this little heartbroken family. And we were very happy because of what it meant. And then at the funeral, as I sat with my mother and grandmother on the mourner's seat, listening to the minister, it suddenly struck me with great horror that what he was doing was preaching my father into hell, and had seized upon this dramatic moment as an object lesson to all sinners and all persons who had not confessed Christ. This is what happens to you. And I said to my mother, Mama, he didn't understand Papa, did he? He didn't know Papa. And I kept building this thing in me, saying it over and over again. And then finally she reached over and put her hands on my knees to communicate the great tenderness that always rode high in her spirit. And I was quiet. But coming back from the graveyard, I talked it out with them, and they tried to explain to me what it was that was at work here. And I listened, but I could not understand. And at 7 years old, boy, I said, well, one thing is certain, that if I ever grow up to be a man, I will never have anything to do with the church. Well, and here I am. I have lived with this dimension of the impact. Now, I want you to follow me carefully now for a little while. Here, you see, is an honest, authentic response to the gospel of Jesus Christ, in the response to which the individuals felt called upon to put the strength of their arm against the weak, the needy, because the weak and the needy had not given voice to the magic formula upon which the salvation of Jesus Christ rested. So this began my search. Jesus. was that his gospel, really? And a little later, when I began to encounter all the circuitous and terrifying problems of the various kinds of violences in my environment, and as I looked out upon the great divide that separated Christians from each other, the crucial problem began to mount more and more frontally in my mind and in my thoughts. And strangely enough, all during the period, I had worked out privately and intimately a place, a kind of fellowship, I don't know quite how to put this, but a meaning and a significance in the life of Jesus, independent of all the things that were being said about him. He and I enjoyed each other. He was as real to me as my right hand. And sitting down on the sand dunes, watching the waves of the Atlantic Ocean late at night, if anyone had come upon me, they would have thought that I was standing in immediate candidacy for some place of incarceration, because I was having conversation. I was talking with him about things, but never praying to him. This is very interesting. Talking with him about various things. I could hardly wait to get off by myself to compare notes, all this in my little imagination. So that on the one hand here was a Jesus, very real to me, no God at that time for me, but a very real personality who had the listening ear. And on the other hand, here was all the other things around me done in his name often that could not be identified with the personality with whom I felt myself in almost constant fellowship. I don't know how to put this in any other way, and I do hope you understand me. So as the years unfolded, I had to face this. I had to find for myself what there was here in the life, in the record, that was capable of administering to the needs of my mind and my spirit in a manner that would leave all of the impact of the things in my environment ineffective in their ability to snatch away from me the companionship which he provided. And I was very grateful for the fact that I had spent so much time wrestling with this, getting no answers, and often confused and depressed, because In 1935, when I went to India, the first day at Colombo, on an invitation from the principal of the law college, I was asked to give a lecture on civil disabilities under states' rights in the United States. Well, this is quite something. Well, I didn't know anything about the technical jargon. I knew about civil disabilities. I didn't know very much about states' rights. That was a political theory that I didn't understand. So I apologized to these law students and the law faculty for the fact that I would not be able to speak in their language, their jargon, but I would talk about the thing experientially, and then they could transpose it into respectable jargon that fitted their pretensions. And this is what I proceeded to do. At the end, there were two questions asked me. One by a young Hindu fellow who said, can you tell me out of what kind of exhibit, out of what kind of material exhibit number something was made that Attorney Leibovitz used in his defense of the Scottsboro boys in Decatur, Alabama, as he said. Well, I didn't know anything about that. And the second question, why did your community wait until the famous Hugh Lee case on the eastern shore of Maryland, as he said, before you contested non-participation in jury service? Now, here are two fellows, one a Hindu, one a Muslim, who'd never been off the island of Ceylon, raising that kind of question. This was 1935, before Sputnik. Then, at the close, the principal invited me downstairs for coffee. And we drank our coffee in complete and utter silence. And then, when the service was removed and the door was shut, he said, I did not intend to ask you any question, but after listening to you upstairs, I'm convinced that you're an intelligent man. What are you doing over here? Oh, he said, I know what the newspapers say about a pilgrimage of friendship from the students of India, from the students of America to the students of India, Burma, and Ceylon, but that doesn't answer my question. What are you doing over here? This is what I mean, he said. 300 years ago or more, your forefathers were taken from the western coast of Africa as slaves by Christians. He said one of the names of a very famous British slave vessel was Jesus. He said you were sold in the New World to people who themselves were practicing Christians in a Christian country, a country started on the basis of Christianity. One of your famous Christian hymn writers, Sir John Newton, as he said, who wrote, published glad tidings, tidings of peace, and he quoted all the hymn. Oh, how sweet the name of Jesus sounds in a believer's ear. He quoted all of that. Made all of his money by selling your forebears. 70 years ago, you were freed by a man who himself was not a practicing Christian, but was a spearhead of certain political, social, and economic forces he himself did not quite understand. And now, for that long interval since, you live in a Christian country in which you cannot be free, in which you're proscribed, that you're lynched, burned. He had all the catalogs. And one of my students went to Columbia to do an advanced degree in law, and he sent me a clipping back that described how in some place in your country, some man from your community was being hounded by a mob on a Sunday night, and the church dismissed its services that the men may join in the hunt. And when the man was done to death, they came back and resumed their worship of their Christian gods. Now, he said, here you are, standing in that tradition, talking to us. I do not wish to be rude to you, he said, but I think a man like you is a traitor to all the darker peoples of the earth. And I wonder what you can say in defense of your position, inasmuch as you are an intelligent man. At last, now, there was brought into sharp focus the problem with which my mind and soul had been wrestling. Who was Jesus? Was he what the Christians say that he was? What was the primary accent of his life? Upon what did he place the emphasis? What kind of religion did he have? Was he on the side of the strong or the weak? The mighty and the powerful, or the disinherited? Was his God the God of power and vengeance and authority and control, the God of veto and certification? Or was he some other kind of God? Who was he? And so I began working to see what kind of answers I could find. Because if I could not find a way, a clue in his life that could sustain the integrity of his meaning, independent of all of the hallowed devotion as expressed in the devoted thought and the inspired moment. If I could not find for myself this, then I could not call myself a Christian. Who was he? On that answer turned the fate of my whole life. My whole life. The first thing that I found out, that's all I should have opportunity to say now. The first thing that I found out, that it hit me with a sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but it hit me. The first thing that I discovered was that Jesus Christ was a Jew. I just hadn't realized this. But he was a Jew. And again, in pursuit of the implications of that discovery, I have been startled by what it's disclosed in my mind that almost, if not equally, as great as is the miracle of this strange and wonderfully incisive and sensitive spirit, is the miracle of the Jewish community itself. How on earth, or in the heavens, could a band of human beings covenanted together by whatever may be the ties, name them, how on earth or in the heavens could they endure the kind of unrelieved, organized, creative, devastating destruction from 70 A.D. down to the present time, and still remain intact? I don't understand this. It confuses the very grounds of my spirit in an effort to get at a satisfactory rationalization for the phenomenon. And out of the womb of that kind of experience in the movement of the forces that go to determine the significance of human history, Jesus came. So it is small wonder that Albert Schweitzer, whose birthday anniversary we celebrate today, says, "He comes to us as one unknown without a name, as he came to the men by the seaside who knew him not. He speaks to us the same language, follow me. And to those who obey him, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the toils and the sufferings and the sorrows and the joys through which they shall pass in his fellowship, and as an ineffable mystery they shall learn in their own experience who he is, who he is, who he is." Leave us not alone, our Father, in the torture of our minds and the tumult that stirs deep within our souls, but speak to our spirits thy calmness and thy tranquility, that we may walk the way that stretches out before us in thy trust. O God, our Father.